Um, it's wonderful today to be welcoming you to the first of the International Society for Research on Solitude seminar series. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julian Stern from Bishop Grosseteste University in Lincoln in the UK. I'm president of the ISRS, the International Society for Research on Solitude, and I'm hosting today's session along with Malgosia Wawejko and Rafał Iransky of the University of Szczecin, who are vice president and secretary, respectively, of the ISRS. So Gosia, as vice president, is in charge of vice, if anyone wishes to partake of vice. And I am delighted to be introducing, and I'll talk a bit about the ISRS and about our guests, Malka Margalit and Eyal Rosenstreich, talking about loneliness and hope. We can do with some hope in our present circumstances, my goodness. Now, many of us got together over the last few years studying solitude, studying loneliness, studying silence, and last year decided to set up the International Society. There is a website and there is an email address which you see on your screen now. Please look at the website. There's lots about us, about membership if you'd like to join, if you're not already a member, about these seminars, about conferences. We've already had 2 conferences, Alone Together in 2019, which was held in York in England, and Alone Together Again, which was a virtual conference held in University of Szczecin in 2020, last year. We also have had 2 special editions of Pedagogia Christiana on the topic of solitude, and we are currently putting together, with help from our guest speakers today as well, a Bloomsbury Handbook of Solitude, Silence and Loneliness. So we've been very active publishing, joining together, and because the conferences can only take place at best every year or 2, and we have a 3rd one that we hope to have in 2022, perhaps we'll be able to meet then as well. Because we have conferences maybe every year or 2, we thought we would like to hear and give people an opportunity to meet some of the leading scholars globally on solitude, silence and loneliness, and particularly those who are not able to be with us at one of the conferences. So we're delighted today to be able to start this seminar series. It will take place every 3 months, usually on the 4th Thursday of every month, but we'll be advertising the dates of those and the people who are presenting on the website. And we will email you as well about those if we have your email address. So I'm delighted today to be introducing Malka Margalit, Dean of the School of Behavioural Sciences at the Peres Academic Centre, Tel Aviv University, author of many, many publications. The book that I've read and that got me to understand her work was on lonely children and adolescents, self-perception, social exclusion and hope from 2010. And Eyal Rosenstreich, senior lecturer at the School of Behavioural Sciences, also at the Peres Academic Centre, Tel Aviv University, again author of many articles, including with Malka Margalit and others, article Hope, Optimism and Loneliness Among First-Year College Students with Learning Disabilities, a brief longitudinal study. We're delighted to, I'm delighted to introduce them. We're delighted to have them with us to talk about loneliness and hope, talk about those 2 together. Malka and Eyal will talk perhaps for about 40 minutes. And then we will have a chance for a similar amount of time to be able to discuss what they say. If you have questions during their talk, perhaps if you could write them down. We don't have the chat facility on Teams at the moment, unless only a few of us have that, so that may be difficult. But afterwards, you'll be able to click on the hand and put up your hand, as it were, and ask a question or make a comment. So now it is just up to Malka and Eyal. I will get rid of my screen and switch my microphone off. So welcome, Malka, welcome, Eyal, and I look forward immensely to hearing what you have to say to us today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's see how does this work for us.
I will leave my microphone on just until it is all working. There, it is perfect.
I don't see you, but I hope you can see me. Is it working now?
Working, yeah.
Working.
Working,
And you
and I
see
can
the
see you.
slides? Yeah.
And the
Okay.
presentation.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here today. I can't see you, so I am talking to my computer. I hope that it would not request me later to consult my psychologist why I start talking to a computer. Many thanks for inviting me to present at the first seminar of the ISRS. First of all, I want to recognize and present my colleague, Dr. Eyal Rosenstreich, that you can see him. I think I can see him now, whose partnership is very valuable to me. His contribution is very important to this presentation, but he allowed me to present it by myself. In fact, we are living in a very challenging time. Loneliness and hope are gaining special significance during the worldwide outbreak of the COVID-19 due to the social distancing policy around our world and the periodical lockdown of educational systems. Human relations are becoming the focus of attention, especially not only for adults, but also for children during this current period because of the lockdown of schools all around the world. The objective of this presentation are to highlight developmental risk of loneliness for children and the role of hope as an empowering and activating agency, while considering the importance of contextual conditions such as systems, communities, and as well as culture. And I would like to talk a few words about the importance of culture on one hand and the inconsistencies in research. But let us first notice something that is very important. Schools are closed. The report from UNESCO emphasized that more than 90% of the world schools are closed for a year, affecting 2 billion children. Altogether, 250 million children globally have not set a foot in their physical classroom for 10 months. They did not meet their friends in schools, including about a third of the US school-age children. Also in Israel, we are facing this question all the time. Some people say we open and close the schools again. We open them hoping that we can come back to normal life, and very quickly we close them again because of the virus. Students who were most disadvantaged before the corona are currently falling even further beyond academically and socially. So this is the very serious part, knowing that we should look especially on struggling children and the impact of distance learning on them, and not only on them. A recent study that was published just yesterday emphasized that the mental health of parents whose children are struggling with the distance learning is also at risk. So this is a really very serious things, considering children, families, and communities. Our presentation is divided into 3 parts. First, I would talk about the loneliness as a developmental risk. Secondly, I want to mention the hope as an empowering agency, and to bring suggestions for future direction in 2 areas, research and intervention. However, before starting my lecture, I take this opportunity to invite you all to our conference. We have a conference in the 23rd of February, it is Tuesday, about hope and well-being during the time of stress, COVID and beyond. It's not just about the corona, but really some variety of very interesting updated research on hope. In these studies, it would be the cutting edge of research and applications, intervention related to hope in a variety of contexts and population, including but not limited to coping with the corona. The talks will be with people from United States, from Europe and from Israel. This is the advantage and the disadvantage of the Zoom and the online presentation and conferences, that you can bring together people from different countries of the world. I'm very sad that the person from Philippines who agreed to participate was not able because it's the middle of night for him. So we adapted some times that would be in between all the three continents, including a keynote speaker. We are very lucky that Jennifer Chavot, who just was the recipient of the award for positive clinical psychology, will bring the keynote address in this presentation. The conference is free of charge. However, you need to register, and this is the link. It would be on the my presentation, and I hope that you can put it also on the homepage of the society. So let's go back. We all hope to see you in Rehovot. It's not in Tel Aviv, in our conference on hope during this stressful time. So loneliness, when we speak about it, we should consider two competing or complementary models. It depends on your point of view or conceptualization. The most well-known one is the discrepancy model. It speaks about the unpleasant experience when individuals perceive a discrepancy between the desired and accomplished pattern of their social network. Whenever we write an article, we usually cite Peplu and Perelman. However, let us also recognize another very common definition, speaking about emphasizing social needs. A global indicator of unmet social needs, dissatisfaction from the quality and the quantity of individual and social relations. I especially emphasize this definition because I want to recognize Steve Asher, who was the first who emphasized the importance of children loneliness. In fact, we proposed a dynamic conceptualization of children loneliness and social inclusion. We proposed a conceptual move from treating loneliness as a dichotomy. Some people are lonely and some children are not lonely, to a focus on a movement along a continuum between satisfying feelings of connectedness, of closeness, of relatedness, to the hurting experience of social exclusion, isolation, and loneliness distress. This approach assumes that nobody is completely lonely or fully connected all the time. Children move dynamically along this continuum. So if we think about loneliness, we should think about the emotional aspects, about the cognitions that are related to the feeling of loneliness, and of course the behavior that is the outcome of the combination of emotion and cognition affecting them. But more than anything else, let's think about the interrelations between connectedness and loneliness. And this is very important, not only from theoretical point of view, to look at the dynamic interrelation between them, but also from intervention, because then the goal of intervention is to move the child from this being on the side of the loneliness into the direction of the connectedness. Before entering into new research in the area of children loneliness, let us ask ourselves, is it serious? Is it a serious problem that needs to be dealt with? If you look at prevalence of the loneliness among children around the world, you will find some statistics. For instance, in UK, there is a statistics about children between the age 10 to 12, 14% of the children claimed that they were often lonely. If you look at Finland, they have a survey of 8-year-old children, and again, 20% of the children reported frequent feeling of loneliness. There is a survey, and by the way, I got a list of all the references of the research that I'm serving for the purpose of this presentation, and you can see a very interesting survey of 52 countries all around the world that really examined 148,000 children ages 12 to 15, and again around 10% or more than 10% in 32 countries stated that they suffer from loneliness. So this is a serious matter. Loneliness is a developmental risk. Even during our technology, this is surprising that we are living in an technology age, where children are all the time are in contact. And even then, even in our technological saturated environments, when there is a growing opportunities for all the time connectedness from different social networks, from children's cells communication, loneliness still exists and demonstrated. This calls for a special focus on children loneliness, because already loneliness starts at an early developmental stage. If I remember a little child, one morning I got a telephone call from a mother, and she said, "You would not believe what happens to me." She's a career lady who has to work every day, and when her little girl told her that she can't go to school, she feels very sick. Her tummy is itching, and she has to stay at home. For a mother who has to hurry to work, this is a serious matter. So she immediately called the preschool teacher and asked her, what is happening? And the teacher said, "I don't have the slightest idea, please come." So the child was persuaded to come with the mother, and she felt a little bit better, but she shared with her mother and said, "I don't want to go to preschool because I don't have even one single friend. I feel so lonely." We are speaking about a very young child in preschool. The teacher was amazed. And she said, "I don't understand why you say such a thing. Everybody loves you." And the girl said, "Yes, but yesterday Miriam quarreled with me. My best friend told me she's not my friend anymore. So I don't have any friend. I don't feel like going to school." This is a painful emotional experience that affects not only the current quality of life, but also a developmental threat if it happens very quickly. By the way, the situation with this girl and the mother was settled because this girl that quarreled yesterday forgot all about it, come running and say, "Hey, why you are late, you should come." And she said, "Are you my friend?" She said, "Of course." And they continue. So every child experiences from time to time some rejection, but the children that it happens to them more frequently develop a risk to their developmental and their future well-being. Before entering into research about the loneliness of children, let us emphasize that solitude is a different thing. Loneliness, we may not feel lonely when we are alone and really enjoying our solitude. However, you can feel very lonely in a crowd, in a class, at school, in many different places. So what is solitude? Solitude has been considered as a pleasant, positive, and sometimes even desirable for adults. And I emphasize for adults because for children, it's a different story. It provides time for daydreaming, for leisure, creative activities. It enables a resting period after a demanding working day, supporting self-renewal. Solitude is the deliberate choice and the ability to stay alone, reflecting cultural aspects, because in different cultures, being with friends and being alone represent different emotional experience. However, children needs during development, at first they have very short period of solitude while staying satisfied, but during development they increase their ability to stay alone and be satisfied. Yet some children have lower ability to stay alone, and they are at a higher risk to develop loneliness at a later stage. Interesting enough, there are some studies that speak about the role of solitude as a developmental risk for some children, because some children are at risk for vulnerability and peer bullying. So it depends, there is some difference in solitude, and very few studies try to understand why solitude provides inconsistent results regarding the outcomes for children. For some of them, it is the beginning of developing the ability to stay alone and be satisfied, and for others, this is a risk for being bullied by other children. Why is it important? It is important because research, developmental study, and comprehensive meta-analysis already demonstrated the importance of childhood loneliness. First of all, the stability. There is a high probability that lonely children might be caught in many unsatisfactory relationships, and their loneliness may become self-sustaining and stable, developing into lonely adults. More than that, some of the lonely children try to avoid social experience because they are very unsatisfactory for them, so that they will not develop the experience, the age-appropriate social competence, and without it, there is a high probability that they would be lonely adults. In addition, the early social distress has an ongoing impact on the personality development, such as self-perception and self-efficacy, and they would feel not sure of themselves and their ability to develop satisfactory social relations. How does it start? What are the sources of loneliness? Children and adolescents have a strong need for social connectedness initially. Almost all children experience loneliness from time to time. However, we are interested in those children that feel lonely more often and that as a very painful experience. Research already demonstrated the genetic sources of loneliness, and they examined them extensively following the recent development of genetic studies. However, this indeed significant heritability impacts already were demonstrated, but the environment interact with this heredity or genetic aspects to present the loneliness situation. So what are the interactions? The study of interaction between genetic profiles and social cultural environment demonstrated the environmental conditions. There are dynamic constructs of families. Even in the same family, each one of the children experience unique relationship with the parents in the same family, in addition to the impact of peer relationship and outside the family. One of the very well-known researcher in child development and parenting counseling described his fatherhood experience. He told me once that when he has his firstborn child, he was the perfect father. He was so happy and so attentive, developing the attachment exactly as it is written in the book. He thought that he is the model of what he is counseling other parents and lecturing to his students. Then the second child came, and the first child was the typical, quiet, good-natured child who is eating well, sleeping well, smiling a lot, and everybody smiled back at them. The second one was a very hyperactive child who was very demanding, crying a lot, refusing to eat, don't sleep at night. And this famous researcher told me, you would not believe I have done exactly the opposite of what I tell other parents. So you have two children in the same family that got different parenting attitude and behavior from the same father who is knowledgeable how good parenting can affect the behavior of children. Children invest considerable effort to stay in close contact with others and to avoid social exclusion. They negotiate close relations inside and outside the families. Thus, individual differences in loneliness may range from short-lived experience of alienation because something happens, to a chronic and deeply negative experience in the family and feeling excluded because of some genetic aspects that are expressed in the different temperament. So temperament is a very important aspect in the beginning of attachment and the early relation between parents and children. It's the relation between genetic-based characteristic of the child and the early environmental interaction. And the study of temperament revealed different levels of infants' reactivity to different environmental stimuli from the very earliest developmental stages with outcomes on the attachment of the child. Recent example, interesting one that people only start being aware to it recently, is the awareness to a special group of children, for instance, the highly sensitive children, children who are they are not hyperactive, they are just sensitive to different stimulus, the environmental influence. They are easily aroused emotionally. They are less accepted by parents and peers. They cry a lot, and they negative emotional arousal and their tendency for social withdrawal might reduce the length of social interaction and their opportunities to stay engaged and socially involved. Without speaking on attachment to parents and to family and attachment later to teachers, we would not understand the fully amount of sources of the loneliness. The quality of close relationship and attachment to parents in early developmental stage has been specially considered as a basic source of the loneliness development. So very quickly, let me just remind you the basic assumption of attachment and move to the research. Infant internal basic needs for closeness and security and the existence of someone who takes care of the infant are the basic condition. The second one is feeling secured, the baby, the infant, enables safe exploration of infants and the development of feeling safe and secured. Successful parenting is dependent on parental feeling that they are successful and valuable and can develop close relation with the infant who really give the feedback that he is secure and appreciative and able to explore the surrounding. However, and my research is usually focused on children with special needs, parenting a difficult child, children who are negotiating with their development may lead to frustration, insecure attachment, parents who are not sure if what they are doing is the right things to do, predicting children loneliness. When children feel securely attached, they acquire the tools for regulating distress. However, when they don't feel secured, the stress has more impact on them. When children experience closeness to their caregivers and secured, they feel lower levels of loneliness. Interestingly enough, this affects not just the emotion. Eyal is our expert in cognitive development and cognitive processing. And the evolution theory of the origin of loneliness presented by Cassiopo proposed that lonely individuals, as a self-preservation, develop special awareness and attention to negative social information. The negative emotions that accompany loneliness are activate an innate social monitoring system that increase attentiveness to social information. So lonely children, not only they feel lonely, they are more sensitive, more attentive to different information, social information, and they tend very quickly to provide negative interpretation that further increase their feeling of loneliness and isolation. Children may have difficulties to cultivate enough time in close, satisfying relationship with adults and children, and may have difficulty developing age-appropriate social skills. They are at a greater risk for experiencing loneliness. Social competence reflects their ability to generate, coordinate, flexible, adaptive responses to interpersonal demands, opportunities, and challenges. Children who have lower social competence may not understand social communication. They may fail acquiring age-appropriate social behavior and feel more lonely. We should look at the different aspects that only recently people start being aware to it. This is entitlement. It's not just what you are feeling or experiencing and interpreting. The source of loneliness is also related to disappointment because you have unfulfilled expectations from children and adults. The sense of entitlement is a subjective perception of the individual feeling that deserve to get their wishes. And children that feel that they're entitled to get something and unmet beliefs that deserve the preferences and the resources may further lead to frustration, disappointment from social connection, and loneliness. But loneliness also is part of the family, of what is happening in the family. We, in early stages of research, keep saying and demonstrating in our studies the importance of family support, and we start being aware that parental loneliness has an impact on children's loneliness. It's a sort of modeling self-esteem and well-being in typical children, but especially for children with special needs. We thought at first that parental support is the way to get children adjustment, self-efficacy, and lower levels of symptom and loneliness. However, we found that although lower levels of loneliness were often reported in cohesive, supportive families. However, even in supporting families, struggling children may feel that their parents are disappointed and they may feel rejected. So in some way, our research on loneliness in the family are moving from stable belief in the importance of family support into focusing on the interaction between the family environment aspects and the characteristics of the child, that some of them were affected or reflect his or her genetic aspects. Children are not affected just by their families. School can be a very lonely place. School in many places are now closed, and we start appreciating schools as a place where children meet and have friends and develop a relationship. Children don't meet their friends recently, and everybody keep feeling that the electronic contacts for many children are a poor substitute. Before the COVID-19, insecure attachment with teachers, not just with friends, was a source for children loneliness. We have a study of third grade children in Israel with reading difficulties several years ago. We tried, these children got a special program where the teachers were giving, the class teachers were giving special time to stay and work with the children who failed in the reading achievement, to see if the children would feel closer to the teachers on one hand and advance the reading. The study reported that although the teachers have more time with the children felt that the teachers are available to them as much as they need. However, they don't like them. So in some ways, the attachment of the teachers to children with special needs reflects the teacher reluctant and distancing of the children. By the way, they learn to read, but the gap between them and the typical children remains, and the increased level of loneliness of children was demonstrated. Children characteristics such as shy children, academic performance such as reading difficulties, teacher attitudes toward children with special needs or children with different characteristics, and peer relations altogether play an important role in creating, on one hand, and maintaining, which is more important, the feeling of children loneliness in school. For example, I was just recently found a research from South Korea children, preschool children 4 to 6 years old, that I thought would be a very good example to show and demonstrate that loneliness is not caused by one reason, but is a combination of the different aspects. In this preschool, the loneliness was predicted by children's shyness. First of all, the more child is shy or viewed as shy children, he is more at risk for developing loneliness. However, the relations with peers, as demonstrated by the play relations, and the teacher closeness play a role. Let us look at this outcome of the statistics of this research. Children shyness was related to play, and again the role of peers who let this shy child play. The more the child is shy, the more he was not invited to play with his peers, and he was more at risk for developing loneliness. We have the closeness of teachers. See, when the teachers were more close, more attached to the children, even shy children were more accepted by their peers. Interestingly enough, this moderation was not significant. The play disconnection by itself has an impact on the level of loneliness. Even though this mediated the loneliness, children's shyness continue also to affect loneliness. However, again, we have a moderation of the teacher. Even for a shy child, the more the teacher was attached to the child, he feels less lonely. I think this is a very interesting research from South Korea, who demonstrate how each one play its role. I would later continue to show a study where we demonstrate how the family enter into this interaction in a different research, different culture. But we should emphasize the cultural aspect. The studies on the impact of culture emphasize individualism versus collectivism that provided additional segment into understanding the children's loneliness and the children's loneliness as an additional segment in the understanding. In a conference in Trosmo, where a colleague of mine, a Norwegian colleague, shared with me, I was presenting in the lecture about the loneliness of children and adolescents, and he told me, "Are you sure? Let me tell you that when I take a vacation, climbing on some mountains, I would like to do it all on my own, a simple solitude things. However, even when I see from a distance somebody, this spoils my day." I compare this experience with the experience of Israel, where we like to meet people in our vacation, to be in contact with others. So some way the combination between individualistic society, who is more competitive, versus collective society, is just part of the segment explaining how the loneliness of children can be developed on the background of the society. And again, we have research results that are inconsistent because probably it's more difficult nowadays to identify the culture as only individualistic or only collectivistic. In a society that emphasized collectivism, maybe people feel less lonely. However, the individualistic children might feel more lonely because they don't want to connect to the collective. We have this experience in the kibbutzim in Israel in the old times where the group was very cohesive, but again, in every group there were some children whose individual tendency was very strong and they feel more lonely because of the pressure of the collective to belong to others all the time. On the other hand, in a competitive individualistic society where there is a very competitive all the time between children, maybe children with difficult special needs and different difficulties, they might feel even more lonely and more isolated and more in need of support by others. We thought when the COVID-19 appears in our life, we thought that since the world is facing global public health crisis in the last year, and suddenly social distance policy was emphasized, and we expected in studies to see that people would report more loneliness, emphasizing individual differences. Surprisingly, we have several studies on the loneliness during the COVID-19. Eyal has just recently presented a study on the loneliness during the pandemic, and I see several published studies showing individual differences in the reaction to the situation. It seems that individuals, and this is maybe the sad part, individuals who were at a higher risk before the pandemic and not those who are socially engaged, those who are more resilient, suffer less. But those that are higher risk before the pandemic were more vulnerable to loneliness during the lockdown. And already we have several studies showing not just them, but also the parents of struggling children who are suffering more loneliness when they see their children trying to understand the distance education and failing even more than being at class. How I am doing with time, Julian? Hey, anybody there?
Sorry, hello, Malka. I had my microphone
yeah,
on.
Okay, I'm okay with time.
Another 5 minutes or so, is that okay?
That's okay.
Okay.
I would try to summarize and to bring the past, future, and where we are going. I want to speak about hope. In fact, loneliness of children reflect their past and current social distress during their development. The hope is focused on the future. So in some way, if loneliness is the outcome of past and current experiences, the hope theory brings us to the future perspective. Let me very quickly go through the hope theory, and I truly invite you to our conference where the people who are the leading researchers in the hope theory would present their recent research. Hope is the knowledge, cognition, and feeling emotions that in a way are out of difficulty, that things can work better, that there are solutions. Hope is focused on the positive of future outcomes. It provides us with a sense of personal control. Let's recognize Snyder's work, who defined hope as a way of thinking, cognitive, about your goals and pathways to reach these goals along the activation of mental energy, motivation to use this pathway. He used to mention, if you remember, the little blue engine that keeps telling himself, I could do it, and it helps. I would like to go quickly. Hope is divided into two sub-scales, two sub-areas. The agency thinking. The agency thinking is the perceived capacity of individual to initiate and sustain movement along the pathway until the goal is reached. This is the motivational component of hope and often is manifested in self-statements such as, I can do it, like the little blue engine in the children's story, who when he was climbing the mountain, he kept telling himself, I can, and it helps him. Pathway thinking refers to the ability not just to wish goals, but to plan different ways to get them and to plan alternatives. It involves not only production of the path and strategies to reach the goals, but also the inner confidence in the ability to find the routes and alternative routes. See this photo that shows that you can get it in different and alternative way, but you need to think about the barriers and you have to move along persistently and cope with the different barriers. This is a study that we have presented 2 years ago, which put together the hope, the family cohesion, the self-perception, the loneliness, and how all of these predict children's effort at school. And I think this is very important to emphasize that hope never stays by itself. It's a combination with the different other one. The cohesion, the family cohesion, families that is supportive, we thought that the more the family is cohesive, it predicts the personality, the sense of coherence, if you know the concept, the feeling how much you have confidence in yourself and in your world, feelings that you are a resilient personality. Family cohesion also predicts hope. Children from cohesive family feel higher levels of hope. It also predicts loneliness, lower levels of loneliness. If your family is supportive, you feel lower levels of loneliness. However, sense of coherence, the strong, resilient personality, predict also higher levels of hope, while the loneliness predict lower levels of hope. And the strong, resilient personality predict lower levels of loneliness. And all of these gather together to explain, to predict what happens with effort. The strong personality predict more readiness to invest effort in your schoolwork. The hope is also a predictor of the more you are hopeful that you can be successful, the more you are ready to invest effort. The loneliness, very interesting, children who are lonely are more ready to work at school. This is in a way a sad story. It means you are so discouraged by your feelings that your friends don't like you. So you are ready to work with your school. So too many friends means less work, successful work at school. Cohesion families also directly predict more effort. So altogether, all this in a sample of 5th to 6th grade children, about 10 years old, explain who are the children who would invest ongoing effort in order to be successful in school. If we try to see how typical hope children, high hope children would be, what type of characteristics they have. They would enjoy setting goals. They are not afraid of challenges. They take more goals and they are ready to have alternative goals. They ask for help without feeling ashamed, and they are also ready to offer help. They apply positive self-talk like, oh, this is interesting, or I am ready to invest in this, or I can find a solution. I like challenges. They applied a wide range of pathways and strategies, and when the pathway is blocked, they still don't give up. They continue pursuing their goals along alternative situations. I would skip the adolescence because the time is running and we want to have time for questions. And let me get to the summary. So what did I present today? We focused attention on children's loneliness as a developmental risk factor. We proposed a comprehensive but dynamic conceptualization, not to differentiate between lonely and not lonely children, and see it as a continuum where we as educator would like to help them move towards the relatedness and involvement and engagement. Research reflects the dynamic interaction between genetic aspects and environmental factors from early developmental stages. And again, the lonely children have a high probability to become lonely adults if we would not intervene and plan how to help them be engaged socially. The hope theory introduced some future positive opportunities and an ability to enter more positive goals and ways to reach them. Thus, if loneliness is the dynamic relationship between past frustration, social connection, and current social distress, the positive future goals of hope and effective pathway may activate and empower the lonely children whose disappointment from themselves and significant others may mobilize them, and the hope can activate them to continue moving. Hope may contribute to their self-confidence, growth, and increase of their not just social connectedness, but also their abilities, solitude abilities. What are the future directions? Future research, and we are researchers, and I would propose international collaboration. Future research has to explore to understand how hope is activating really the lonely child who is more withdrawn, who tend to be more passive and distancing himself from society. What is happening? How hope is enabling this move along the continuum from loneliness toward relatedness, social engagement, and satisfaction. There is still no research in this, and we need to put our effort into it. Since there is a very strong component of cultural impact, there is a need for comprehensive collaboration between international studies to examine in depth the developmental aspect of loneliness in different cultures, not trying to be stuck in the concept of collectiveness and individualistic society, but to look more at the different segment and the interaction between children and characteristic and the emphasis of the culture and the different environments in which the child lives in, and the interrelations with hope and outcomes. Let's hope that soon the social distancing policy due to the pandemic will remain just a bad memory that has emphasized the importance of close relationship, companionship, and social engagement. Let's hope that we shall be able to meet not on the computer, but face to face. Just a minute. I would like also to mention intervention direction. Intervention direction may focus on coping with current loneliness distress using the various approaches such as mindfulness, hope theory, increasing opportunity for social engagement. We found, especially now in the social distancing policy, that children and adults who were socially engaged before the pandemic were doing better and less lonely during this situation. The challenging way we should look for a way to challenge maladaptive social belief. Mindfulness practice may promote the cultivation of self-compassion and self-acceptance. Hope theory proposed the focus on future by identifying goals and planning pathway. Already there are several hope workshops that are running, and in our conference there would be several examples from working with students and working with people who have cancer, proposing different ways from very single meeting of hope to a more duration workshop with young adults and adults. The major challenge is we still need continuing developing and experimenting focused and extended hope intervention for children. In addition, let's promote hopeful thinking in different cultures, families, schools, and communities. We cannot prevent crisis or stress. We cannot promise our children and ourselves that we shall never fall. We cannot promise children that they will never feel lonely. However, we can empower them to get up after falling, to keep moving, to keep advancing. We can motivate children to invest effort, to struggle until they may reach their goal, develop hope, develop meaningful relationship, and celebrate success. When you look at this photo, you can see this young person pushing this huge stone, either preventing it from falling or maybe pushing to change it. We don't know. It depends on our perception, our conception, and the way we want to change things. So let me thank you for being attentive without my being able to see you. Again, present the link to our registration, to our conference, and my email if somebody wants to stay in contact. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let me just finish. Did I close my presentation?
No, not yet. You know, there is the.
How do I do it?
There is a box with a cross there. You've done it. Well done.
Yeah. Am I out?
Yes, you are out, and you are here and with us. Thank you so much, Malka.
And let me again thanks Eyal for being my partner. And let me present it.
Indeed. And I know he was involved in the research, of course, so
yes.
it is both of you. Thank you particularly for going through not just an analysis, a wonderful scholarly analysis of loneliness, and then moving on to hope, and then moving on to interventions and the relationship between them. I have many, many questions, but I will save my questions and ask if other people have questions. Either if you wish to unmute yourself and call out, or if you want to be polite and like all the best people in schools, put your hand up. You are more than welcome. But if someone has a question, please, would you like to ask? Or a comment? People are finding their mute buttons and unmute buttons.
Piotr has a question.
Yes. Piotr Domaracci. Do you have a question?
Please, for me, if he can say from where he is, or some words.
Yes.
So we can't meet, so at least introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Piotr Domaracki. I'm a professor of philosophy at Nicholas Copernicus University in Torun, Poland. Thank you so much for an exceptionally interesting lecture, saturated with a lot of concrete. I would like to ask the speaker if she does not think that preventing loneliness should be carried out in two parallel ways. As a corrective action on the one hand, when an episode of loneliness occurs, and as a preventive action on the other, before loneliness develops. The former aims at supporting and accompanying the lonely child in experiencing and recovering from loneliness. The latter involves changing the approach to loneliness in the general education and upbringing system. This change, as I see it, would be to educate for loneliness and not, as so far, to educate against loneliness. Instead of frightening children with loneliness and creating a syndrome of learned helplessness when it appears, perhaps it would be more appropriate to equip children with the knowledge to cope with loneliness, with the knowledge that it is an unavoidable part of human existence. I'm curious of your opinion and some suggestions or assumptions dealing with what I matter. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I answer or?
Yes, of course.
Okay. You are very right that we should differentiate between the treating the prevention efforts by educating parents to be aware to the quality of the relations with children and how they cope, and also with young children, helping them develop a meaningful, enjoyable social connection. I think the preventive aspects are very important, especially also awareness to some parents who by themselves are lonely people, and provide a model for their children. And by helping them cope with their own loneliness, they would be better able to develop close connection with their children. I still remember some cases where when I was consulting parents and I talked with the mother, and she said she's in panic because her daughter was not invited into a party, and she said, I know it from my own experience. This is how my loneliness started. So she should be very much desperate. And you could see that the emotional aspects of the parents treating the loneliness pass into the children way of treating their loneliness. So in one way, the prevention is very important, and especially the counseling of parents from very early stages to be aware to different children, and different children take from parents different types of parenting that may affect their developing of loneliness. On the other hand, it is very important, and we should, I think, enter more awareness to our school systems and to counseling parents to know how to cope with loneliness. Because again, you could see that children who are not lonely behave completely different when they feel frustrated. I remember my students make observations at school children, and they could see that sometimes when the children are playing with a ball, and somebody comes to them playing football, and the child comes to them and asks, may I join you? And they said, no, we're a group, you can't join us. The child that is not lonely would go home, would cry a little bit, feel very angry, but would go again tomorrow with his own ball, trying to propose to children that he wants to join the group. The lonely child would go home, close the door on his room, and would not talk with anybody. So in some ways, you are so right by saying that if we teach children to accept the fact that they can struggle and they can develop hope and they can develop target and ways how to cope with their social rejection, situations that are embarrassment, and to know how to target different goals in order to reach a social engagement that is satisfactory on one hand, and to develop way of enjoying solitude. Mm-hmm. Although solitude might be dangerous if it is overcoming too much of their free time. So you are so right.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Can I ask myself, this is the chair's privilege, related to what you said, developmentally, is it in some ways good that a person will have been through a period of loneliness? Rather like bereavement, it is a terribly sad time, but we are probably more mature, more wise for having been through a bereavement. Is loneliness, I think Clark Mustakis says that developmentally loneliness can stimulate positive moves and creativity, and may be valuable in some ways, even though it is clearly a form of suffering.
I think we can't prevent loneliness. I think every child from time to time experiences social disappointment, rejection, feeling that he is struggling on his identity versus the society, that the society don't understand it. This is part of life, you can't avoid it. The question is to teach children how to cope with it, not to be able, some children can't stay alone. They need all the time to be connected. We have to teach them to stay sometimes alone, to be able to stay with themselves and to move from loneliness to solitude, to be able to find more engagement. By the way, if you look at young children nowadays, people are overwhelmed, over trying to give them stimulus all the time. They don't let young children stay alone. They all the time give them attention, give them stimulus, different stimulus, either by the video or the talking to them or playing to them, and not teaching them that you can stay alone without feeling lonely. And if you are lonely, either cope with it or find what you can do at that time and develop the ability to work by yourself or to develop your thinking. So in some ways, every, let us say, extreme is dangerous, and we can't prevent loneliness. We can teach how to cope with loneliness and to have the preference.
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful. And suddenly we have 4 people who would like to ask questions. Wow. Perhaps we could ask if I will ask in turn all 4 to ask the questions, so you have a chance to think about the 4. Anna Moravska, Anya, do you have a question? There you are. Hi.
But I think we met, Anna, is it?
I don't know, maybe at the conference.
No, when we experimenting the use of the Teams? No, my mistake. No. So who are you, Anna?
Maybe not. But I'd like to say thank you for your lecture, but mostly for underlining the role of hope in child and adolescent development. That's what I'm interested in a lot. And you talked about Snyder theory, and I would like to ask you about the third element. I mean, agency thoughts. In my opinion, is the most complicated element of this theory, and I even can say more mysterious component of this theory. And I wonder, what is your opinion of develop or encourage development of this element of hope? It is one question. And if I can, another one is connected with the future. What is your opinion on relation future, hope to the future, in opposite to the whole period of time? I mean, past, present, and future. What do you think? It is good that we underline only future in thinking of hope, and sometimes forget about past and present. And sometimes maybe we concentrate too much on the future when we talk about hope. That's what I'd like to know your opinion about. Thank you.
That's 2 big questions. We'll get another couple of questions. Thank you, Anya. And I've written them down as well, I hope, but I understand you are too. Michal, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, hi everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Malka for a fascinating lecture. As Malka stated before, I have been fortunate enough to work with Malka for the past several years on research on loneliness and hope. So I know this issue and very thoroughly. I just wanted to comment on one of the things that Malka has suggested regarding the ability to sort of bear loneliness. And my second-hand hat, besides a researcher, I'm also a clinical psychologist. And one of the most basic theories that we learn is the concept of the capacity to be alone by Donald Winnicott, which is one of the most, I think, fundamental and basic theories in human development. And I think it is fascinating to see how, on one hand, the aversive outcomes of being lonely, that feeling that you don't have anybody to rely on, and on the other hand, the ability or the capacity to be alone, to feel that you can manage on your own, that you can find even joy and satisfaction and fulfillment even on being alone. I think these are 2 aspects on the same continuum, and I think it will be very interesting to see if there has been research that is linking these 2 very important concepts between the capacity to be alone from one hand, loneliness, because I think that one may sort of complement the other. So again, I just wanted to thank Malka again for another fascinating, interesting lecture. I always learn a lot from these opportunities, and thank you all.
Thank you, Michal. I'll ask one more question, one more person to ask a question. The third person to put their hand up was Gosia of Awaco. Would you like to ask? Hi.
I'm here, yes. Thank you, Malka, very, very much for your wonderful speech and very inspiring. I have a question because I was wondering about some results of pandemic. And you mentioned that in your research, it seemed that the results of pandemic and pandemic's influence towards loneliness was somehow inconsistent. And I was wondering whether it could have a connection with, I would say, probably positive impact of lockdown towards families. Because, for example, I have 3 children and one is highly sensitive, and he was extremely happy that he can stay home with his mommy and daddy and siblings and so on, because we all know how we live. We live in rush. The contemporary time is demanding for families, and sometimes we are not attentive enough. So I was thinking whether we could find here a kind of paradoxically positive impact toward children mental sphere, preventing from loneliness. And I just wanted to ask you whether you noticed something like that in your research, and if it was significant. Thank you.
Thank you. My goodness. So we had Anya asking about hope. Is it too future oriented and agency? We had Michal asking about, well, Winnicott,
capacity of
balance between the capacity to be alone and loneliness, or versus loneliness, and Gosia asking about any evidence of a positive impact of lockdown for children. Malka, would you like to try? That's another lecture, but if you could just give us some ideas.
Yeah, I would like to start with Gosia. Gosia, it's her name? Yes?
Yeah. Yes, Gosia is correct. Yes.
Can you say it again? Gosia?
Gosia, yes.
Gosia, okay. I would like to start with Gosia, and I'm very happy for what you said. We don't have a formal study, but we talked with lots of people about the loneliness. We have some research that shows that if we look at means, just correlations and means, there were no impact on the loneliness during the lockdown. However, when you talked with people, and especially with parents, we found some parents that found it very interesting that they have time to be more with their children. And some children, especially children who feel that their parents are rushing them and school is not a very happy place for them, they are very happy to stay at home. A colleague of mine, for instance, says something very similar to what Gosia said, that he said, for my ADHD child, this was the best thing that happens to him in many years, because he has small groups, he can work as long as he wants to, he can stay away from too much stimulus, he can choose the friends that he wants to be with. So in some ways, it depends how people cope with the different environmental changes, and she's very right. If I would go back to Michal, Michal spoke about the capacity of staying alone, of Winnicott ideas. I think this is a major beginning to look at the value of solitude for children that because they can stay alone and they have the ability, the emotional and the cognitive ability to find enjoyable activities, to be with themselves, to meet themselves, they feel less lonely. The question is developmental. It depends how old these children are. And the second question is, do they have enough experiences with friends, because the social competence is dependent on habits, about the ability to understand complex communication during being with friends, to develop social skills. And even if you are, so loneliness in some ways you can say it's an interaction between feeling yourself and being interacting with others. And if you don't have a strong feeling for yourself, of course you have vulnerability while you are interacting with others. So some types of balance, and it's a developmental balance between them, can really predict children that feel less lonely, or even when they are lonely, they know what to do. They know how to cope with it in a more adjusted way and more well-being. If I go back to Anna's questioning, that's very interesting, because in some way it's not, we are speaking about future. However, how do we develop goals of the future? They are usually based on our past, what we like, what we enjoy, who we are, and this is related not just to goals in space, but goals that we try to adapt, continue our past or present, or to change our past or present. So the interaction is always existing between past and future. The agency, it's very interesting. I think many of us are very good at identifying goals. We can continue trying to reach the goals. I think an advantage of what Snyder emphasized was it's not enough to start reaching your goals. What you need is persistence, being ability to continue moving towards your goals, trying to change or to continue your current situation in order to do things that would help you. In the conference, a colleague of mine is working with patient with cancer, whose life expectancy is very small. They are living in hospice already. So in fact, they are counting days for their life. When he told me that he's speaking about goals and future, for people that their future is very short, he said you would not believe it, how much it changed the quality of life, and they are more tolerable to pain. They feel less pain when they have something to expect, and their goals, their future is a short one. For instance, what am I going to do tomorrow? Or who I am going to talk with tomorrow, and how I am going to plan what I want to eat or where I want to go. From people who develop hope that is long-term, like our students, whose hopes are to be successful in their examination, or to reach their degree, or to be able to be psychologist. So goals, it is what you define as your goals that are worth involving them. And this is the agencies that Snyder speak about, and the way he bridged the future with the past and the present, and bring us to something more holistic in our life. Did I answer, Anna?
Yes, thank you a lot.
Yeah,
It's what is very interesting for me, and that's why I like your lecture a lot, and I'd like to some comments of you. So thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. although we have three other people, Marcin Murzyński, Elżbieta Ozewska and Yara Karofsky, who have questions. I don't think we'll have time to have them all. And I will say now, please, if you have questions, I'm sure Malka would be interested in, if you wish to email her, and if you have not got her email address, you can email me or the ISRS on the website, and we will pass those questions on. What this whole event has said to me is we need more of these events. It is wonderful, rich account you've given, both of, and I know you have your the Hope Conference, which I will be at as well, coming up, both of loneliness and solitude and hope. I couldn't have asked for more myself. I now have to rewrite what I've already written for the handbook and for everything else. So you have given me some homework, Malka, and all of us so much to think about. And it will be good to continue, and please, if we all who have other questions, continue to ask those of each other and of Malka. I am delighted that you've been able to be with us, Malka and Eyal, and I know Eyal has been quiet. I know how much, and I work with him on other projects as well. I know how much he contributes to all the scholarship, and thank you, Eyal. Thank you, Malka, and on behalf of all of us, thank you so much. We will be carrying Gosia and hello, people are switching their cameras on. How good. Shall we have a round? If you wish to put your microphones on, we could even have a round of applause. I think Malka deserves that at least. And Gosia and Rafa, I think we'll carry on talking a little afterwards. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, we managed it. The technology.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.